Welcome to Neuro-Revolution. The world was not designed for us, so we are creating a new one. Hear the stories of neurodivergent entrepreneurs, creatives, and changemakers. The rebel minds changing the world.
Welcome to this week's episode, where I am talking with Michelle Kemp, an integrative embodiment coach and founder of Home and Vessel. In her practice, she integrates focalizing, which is a somatic approach, plant medicine healing, and nature in supporting her clients on their journey back home to themselves. She primarily works with Black individuals, supporting them as they gently heal, unmask, and unravel from systemic and generational wounds. Michelle is a neurodivergent individual with a compassionate, curious, and neuro-affirming way of supporting her clients to the reclamation of their whole, authentic self, thus coming home to themselves. Welcome, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. It was, as you were reading it, I don't know if I've heard anyone read, or say those things that I say about myself, but hearing it and letting it kind of land on me. And just kind of checking in with the depth of this work. And I'm actually kind of getting emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for that introduction. I kind of wanted to see if it's okay to just start with a practice.
Yes.
Just to kind of let this conversation land however it should for either us, but also for those that are listening. So just taking a moment to kind of settle into our seats. You don't have to close your eyes, but if you would like to, you can. If not, just a soft gaze to something in front of you or down below. And just noticing your feet on the ground. Noticing any textures, what your feet are touching, if it's your socks, your shoes, the floor. Noticing any sensations. Maybe even noticing just this slight push and pull of gravity from the earth that supports us, that keeps us here grounded. And then just bringing your awareness up, maybe to your seat, noticing the contact of what your sit bones or your hips are touching. Noticing your posture in the seat. Noticing that you are a body here in this moment, sitting. Then bringing your awareness up to your chest. And if you want, you can take your hand and place it on your heart or your center. Just taking a moment to notice. Notice your breath. Maybe even noticing if there's warmth from your hand on your chest. Letting that warmth transfer to that heart space. Noticing how you are a body breathing and how your body breathes for you with less effort. Just noticing your breath. Maybe even noticing how your heart rests on your breath. Like it literally rests on the diaphragm. Maybe even allowing yourself and your breath and its ability to have less effort, allowing your body to do that. So maybe if it's getting more comfortable in your seat, allowing yourself to know that you don't have to perform. Most of this is for myself. There's no performing to do here. Yeah. And so in this moment, maybe bringing this to a landing, bringing with you whatever you experience. And if you're listening, maybe just allowing yourself to listen. Nothing else to do. No worrying about retaining what you might hear today, but just being present. So slowly, if your eyes were closed, blinking them open. If there's something that wants to move, allowing that to happen. Looking around your space. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. A breath. A breath. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for allowing me to do that. There's so much, you know, as a late identified, high masking, um, ADHD and autistic person, that I have to, remind myself like, oh, there's, I don't have to perform. um, there's not, I can be, I can just be, right? Um, so yeah, I often have to remind myself of that and allow that to kind of take place and happen.
What a
Yeah.
beautiful reminder. Thank you so much for that practice. I feel more in my body myself as well. So I
Yeah.
really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I was going to ask to start off, since as you're sharing about being a late identified autistic and ADHD person, what was your journey to discovering this about yourself? If
Yeah.
you would like to share.
Absolutely. I think it's really important. I am a mother of four, and my oldest was, this actually happened, 2020, 2021. We started to homeschool and continued to homeschool. And there was a time where we were thinking about actually putting them back in school, looking at like a Montessori school. And so, they go and they do the like, I don't know if it's called an interview or assessment, they do the things. And actually the one of the teachers was like, okay, this is great, but I think she might need an assessment, like an educational assessment. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, and I had noticed some things anyway, and she was actually in school, and um, we were kind of working through some things with her at school, but they couldn't just flat out say like, oh, they had to go through the things to do it. And so we go and get her assessed, and when it's a kid, she was probably at the time 7. Yeah, 7. And so the parent does most of the things, the social things in there. And so I'm looking through the assessment. And as I'm doing it, I'm like, this looks really familiar. This sounds like me. What is this? Like, what is this? Yeah. And I'm like checking through the stuff. And so she was diagnosed. And so in that, in my homeschooling, I was noticing that I was on the brink of what I now know. I didn't know it at the time was burnout. And so I was seeking out my own support and I sought out a coach because I was just, becoming very overwhelmed. And in that, we kind of went through homeschooling, but also unschooling, like deschooling and just kind of detaching from the systems. And the more that I did that, the more that I started to recognize the ways that, I was masking and, because even with my daughter's diagnosis, there was still kind of like, okay, well, we could fix this, we could work through it. And so that's how I came about, and it's just each moment with my coach was just lifting, the layers of myself. Yeah, and so I say that homeschooling or unschooling was definitely the path to my own liberation in this and recognizing because my children, it was like, oh wow. And so in that recognizing like I don't want them to go through what I went through pretty much ever since I can remember, feeling like I was different.
Yeah.
Knowing like something, I just see it, the world different. And so it has been quite liberating in that way. Yeah. Yeah.
Liberating. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
And it's only been, I guess, a few years then.
Yeah.
What can you say has changed or shifted for you, like since having this discovery? You were kind of describing it a little bit, right? That sense of layers coming off. But yeah.
Yeah. It's quite interesting. I will say that my relationship with grief has become I'm like grief and I are besties.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because there's so much as you're peeling back those layers, there's so much of like, wow, so much thinking about the things that you didn't get and having to kind of, lose there's so much loss, kind of having to lose all of those things or not be okay, but grieve like, oh, I didn't get these things, or grieve the experience that I felt like I should have had,
Mm.
but also grieving like the ways, just of like who I thought I was, because who the masked me was, and this discernment too of like what's the mask and what is actually me. Um, and so, it's been both liberating and also like, oh, but wait a minute, this kind of grieving part. And it's actually how I led to this somatic work, because there was so much to unravel, and I needed support in that, for myself, but also, as I said, help support others. And so a lot of that too, I talk about decolonizing and just kind of noticing or recognizing things that weren't mine. So the systems, we talk about capitalism, like, this is grief of how I assimilated, sometimes out of the sheer need of survival, right?
Yeah.
To be, this is the way, this is the safe path. My brain is like, oh, we figured it out. This is the way we have to go, with the layer of being a Black woman, right? And so there's, noticing that. Yeah, so it's been both liberating, but also, with this layer of grief. When I've been coming back to myself, home to myself, as I like to call it, just recognizing like, oh, all those years.
Yeah.
all those years. But it has been really awesome being able to witness myself in that way. And then to also see, if I go back family wise and be like, oh, this is what really was
That's why.
happening.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Like, oh, my mother, like, oh, my grandmother. Like, it's just, to see that.
Mm.
Um, yeah. And even there's even grief in that. Like, they, even now, don't really get to experience themselves wholly because of them having to mask. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that it can be such an intense process, especially when you find out later in life, maybe always. Um, there is that combination of liberation, or at least I will share for myself. It was like, finally, at least there's like a reason, so it was very like relieving, I guess. But then, like you said, then you start really looking back and reflecting, and it can bring up a lot of grief.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of grief. And also, like, I kind of shared a little bit about this, but like the shame too. Like, I think
Mm,
that kind of how, yeah, shame kind of shape shift in all these, you know, whether it's the grief or whether, it kind of attaches to the anger. Oh, yeah, the anger. Wow. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And so that has been really helpful too in like kind of stripping back that shame, whether it is the way that I do things or, with my time or not being able to, do things in a certain way. So releasing that and peeling back those layers of shame has been so, so profound in this. And allowing myself and recognizing like there's nothing wrong with me. There's actually nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is nothing wrong with me. Yeah. So yeah. And that is a constant reminder. It really is. Yeah.
Which makes total
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, there's so many messages, so many things that are having to be navigated, and
Yeah.
and especially with the unmasking journey, because like the masking in of itself is like trying to fit yourself in something that's not going to work, but because you've been given this message, or we've often been given that message that we're not doing it the right way, or and so when
Hmm.
we start undoing that, you open the door to all those messages becoming much more conscious, I feel, around
Yeah.
like, oh, well, no wonder I was sort of automatically doing this, because when I kind of step into or lean into doing it the way I actually need to, like, then all this judgment comes up, and the shame.
Yeah. Even talking about it from a nervous system kind of perspective, and in my work, being trauma informed and noticing that my teachers shared this with me, noticing that all of these things, like when we talk about what we're doing from our nervous system, and so much of me working with my nervous system has supported, again, like I said, has supported in this unmasking. But like shame has its place of supporting us because our nervous system, because who we are as human beings, want this sense of belonging. The sense of belonging is needed because, of community and how we support. And so it's so easy for us to start shaming, to, like you said, to go to fit in into this box of, or it's easy for us to yeah, just kind of assimilate or mask for that reason. And so I think it's really important, to have, whatever the words may be. And for me, it's there is nothing wrong with you. And to start to kind of, hold these systems up here to kind of see, oh, this is why it's for this system or it's for this that I kind of went into masking. Yeah. I don't know if I explained that well.
No, thank you. I I just love how you sort of undemonized shame in a way. Like, I don't know how to,
Mhm.
that's the word, but
Yeah. Yeah.
but
I unshamed shamed.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was just like, because once you said that, I started shifting and was like, well, okay, so then you could look at it from a place of being like a partner, like you get to like have a relationship with it, where it's like I'm not running away from shame, or like I just got to heal it so I can get past it, but like maybe there's something about it, there's something here that can work with me. um and not that I want to like have a ton of shame or anything, but like but like maybe it can be something that informs me, or it's like telling me things and giving me wisdom.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the bulk of somatic work or focalizing, in the sense is like all of these things, whether it's my anger, whether it's my grief, whether it's shame, whether it's joy, pleasure, desire, though all of those things is information. And so yeah, my coach, who's a colleague now, she was sharing with me about shame, and like, and there would be times where I'd be like, "Ugh, I'm not shaming myself in this," and but like she would just kind of go deeper into like just like minor things, and I'm like, oh, I am. And there's so much even in unmasking. There's as a late identified high masking, yeah, neurodivergent, there's gaslighting too, right? Yeah, and so yeah, you made a good point about that, because there is a relationship that can be had as a way of informing, um, and that's really what the nervous system is for. Is this really to like let us know, like, whoo, okay, the brain gets in the way, and it's like, nope, we're just gonna take this as a threat. We're gonna take this, and now we do the things that we need to do to kind of stay safe. But if we really tap into our bodies and our nervous system, we can kind of see where, um, yeah, what it has to share with us, this wisdom that is inside. So, yeah.
Oh, I'm actually really excited because this can help us move into, I would love to hear about your work as a somatic practitioner. And you specifically mentioned focalizing, and I don't think I've heard of that practice specifically. So if you would like to share a bit about that, it'd be awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So I find that focalizing was like just this, yeah, just this little piece. Not little, it's actually pretty big now, but this piece that kind of came in to really, yeah, it was kind of missing in my practice. And what it is, it's a somatic or bottom up approach. And so somatic just means working with the body first, which I think is really important for neurodivergent people, because we mostly, um, yeah, if we were allowed, from such a young age to listen to our bodies and the needs, that's just one of the ways that we process. And so yeah, focalizing is so beautiful. It is an intention based body approach. And so we bring this intention to mind, and then it's so beautiful because I this probably isn't good marketing, but honestly it really is led when I'm holding space for others, led by the individual. And I'm just there to kind of guide and look out for nervous system responses. But it seems it almost is like this subconscious kind of work, going beneath the layers of what the body has to say about whatever your intention is, whatever your experience has been. And so it gives this moment to kind of be with the body directly. Um, it gives an opportunity to, especially, I think I'll speak for myself, but the way that my body speaks to me sometimes is through, visualizations or colors or, and so it really allows for this opportunity for all those things to happen, all of the senses, and to gain so much wisdom about whatever the subconscious kind of wants to bring up. And so it looks like a guided meditation sometimes, but it really is kind of just following this thread of what the body has to say. And so I love it because it still brings in a little bit of the mind when you have like this intention set, and then you're kind of letting the body kind of, um, yeah, show its wisdom. I don't know if I explained that well.
No, I think so.
It's oh yeah, it is so powerful, and it just gives. And so what that is, if I were to go into it, blends neuroscience in. So me talking about the nervous system, talking about our triune brain. We have these three parts. There's more than three parts, but the prefrontal cortex, of course it's gonna
Oh,
leave me.
I should know
Yeah,
this too. But I'm
yeah.
also
It's
blanking.
of course it's gonna leave me, but it's one I'm like just I can see it 1, 2, and 3. And so we're working with this part of the oldest part of the brain. Some people call it the survival brain, some people call it
Oh,
the reptilian. So right here at the brain stem. And so it's where all of the old patterns, all of the um, responses in our nervous system is held. And so, when we're working with that part of the brain, we're allowing for past um, trauma or past patterns to kind of become coherent, to complete. Because what happens is
mm,
they get stuck in there, and that signal gets stuck, and then it sends it up to the prefrontal cortex, and now the prefrontal cortex that's all it can do is respond to what might not actually be a threat, in a way of this feels like a threat to me, even though it isn't, because I've kind of logged it back there as this is threatening. I got to move to safety. Um, and so there's just this blend of this natural intelligence of the body along with the neuroscience, to complete maybe stuck or past trauma experiences, so that now it kind of, yeah, I just do this kind of like dissipates, yeah, this rewriting this of these patterns of the brain by bringing the body along. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
And I love that way of talking about it, about completing, the process, because like you're saying, when something maybe like shocks our system, we can start looping in it, but that's not processing. It's just looping. And so then it just gets triggered and loops around. And I mean, it made me think of, like the example of like when I get mad, I feel like I almost see red, right? So like the the part of our brain back here in survival mode will kick on, and then it just completely will put a filter over everything that's happening right in our mind. And so I love
Yeah.
what you're saying. Like you are going, and you with these practices, you're able to tap into that part of the brain that does kick in, and it's trying to like help you and keep you alive. But it might be like over maybe triggered at different things, and then just like completing the cycle so it stops getting looped. Yeah, that makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. 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 And so it it's beautiful in the way that it does. And what I love about focalizing too is that it's gentle. And
Mm,
so it doesn't, sometimes some practices can overflow the system and then just sends us back, back
yeah.
to the thing because it was too much. And so, yeah, there's different definitions of trauma, and one of them is essentially is overwhelm. Like it's where there's too much happening. But another one, my teacher with somatics, focalizing particularly, Joe Miller, shares that it could also be something that didn't happen for too long, right? And so,
Right.
and so, yeah, I have combined that, being late identified neurodivergent, like, oh, there's so much that I didn't get to do, while I necessarily didn't have like, a direct experience with trauma. There's things that, underneath that, yeah, was traumatic to me.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Sort
yeah.
of like the complex version where it's like that
Yes,
extended period of something. Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yeah,
I was going to ask you, I'm glad you brought up the fact that it's gentle because I know, like, for some autistic folks, it can be really difficult when you start, what is it called? Like proprioception, when you start
yeah.
like becoming aware of of our bodies, because it can be like stimulating, even just like getting aware. And so, what have you found with maybe that gentleness of it, or like what helps it to be gentle, maybe for those who find that overwhelming?
Yeah. Um, so what helps it to be gentle is, oh, I love that question, is noticing, um, the number one thing is allowing for safety and noticing capacity. And so that's where the facilitator kind of comes in and makes sure that we're not overextending into a capacity that will cause overwhelm. And that's where I say, like, the person who I'm facilitating for, or those that I work with, they are the guide, right? And so there's choice. And so that is the number one thing, is that there's choice, there's consent. And so, when I'm facilitating for someone, it's always like, if it feels like too much, like, you noticing your baseline, like even how you enter. And so if you know what your baseline is, we know not to go too far, from that, or we know not to do too much. And so the biggest thing is the choice or consent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so there's this kind of pathway to deeply listening to self, right? Not trying to override for the sake of masking. And so I think that's where the gentleness come in. And so also making sure that that person is resourced enough. We talk about resource and focalizing. So what are the things? What do you need? Do you need to hold on to something? Like, I keep my rocks near me.
Yeah.
What is it? So just really recognizing that, all the things, whatever it is that you need, like bringing that in, into resource. Um, yeah, and just this allowance to be is really what it is. Just to be, which allows for the gentleness. And so you can, when it feels like too much, the facilitator pulls back, and not even pull back, because usually it's not getting to that point, but knowing the practices to kind of, yeah, titrate. There's this kind of like
Yeah.
going back and forth to allow for that to happen gently. So
I could see that practice not only in and of itself being valuable, but the practice of it developing a lot of self-trust. So I feel like with masking, we can lose some self-trust because of how much we've had to override the signals that we're getting that we maybe something's overwhelming, or we don't want to be doing it in that way. And so that sounds really beautiful, actually.
yeah, yeah, and you make a great point, because that's why I say, like, oh, this was a missing piece, because it really is like, then it just turns into, this is who I am, right? And that's it. There's nothing else, right? And so this is how I live, which kind of leads me into like embodiment. Like, other cultures don't even have the language or the word embodiment, because they just are.
Right. We have
we
to describe it to
we have to,
ourselves.
right, because there's so much that we've, like, we've packed on, and to do this. And so that's why this work is so important to me, because it is this kind of, again, this coming home to ourselves, to our bodies, just by stripping away, yeah, of all the things that we've just kind of packed on, or the reasons we've, like, we override. And so, yeah, and so I tell people, and again, not a like, it's probably not the best thing, but like, this is sustainable. You won't even, I'm here to support and guide you to this, but oh my gosh, you really don't even need me after this. You will always have this. We always have our bodies.
Mm.
There's just so much of, these systems, of the conditioning of this world that has us disembodied.
Mm.
Um, yeah, yeah,
As you said that, I finally realized that what the vessel refers to, the body.
yes,
I don't know. I
it
just kept
does.
picturing a vessel in my mind, and so I didn't make the connection right now.
No,
I'm like, oh, duh.
yeah, no. I mean, it does, and it refers to. I also do pottery as my creativity. Creativity is so
Oh,
important to me. Yeah, I made this.
oh, that's beautiful. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And so there's so much even in that. Like I've connected, just the earth and clay and yeah, just so I've learned so much about how similar we are, like when I'm molding clay, and clay has a memory, and just thinking about like ancestral memory or generational um, memory, epigenetics. And so they all kind of just, yeah, home and vessel was just kind of just this little thing, I don't know.
I love, yeah.
Kind of just do it. And the heart too. I think about the heart as this kind of vessel. um and most of my work is, yeah, just us coming back. Like if we really were to speak from our heart to um yeah, just be in a place of that. Yeah, that it helps us to reimagine this world. And I love you, even with you, yeah, this this building of what yeah, you call us rebels, and us,
Yes.
what we're doing is, there is this rebuilding happening. um so yeah, so vessel, heart, body, yeah, absolutely.
Multifaceted.
Yes, it is.
Oh, and
Yeah.
coming back to the self, and you've said that multiple times, and I know too, you reference specifically like the decolonizing aspect of your work. Would you like
Yeah.
to share a little bit, like how, like what does that approach look like for you in your work?
Yeah. Um, yeah, that approach is really about this having this deep inquiry with, like, I like to say, who told you that? Like, really,
Yeah.
if there's something that that comes up for you, if it is the shame, if it is yeah, whatever it is, what I find is, even for myself, I talked about how homeschooling and unschooling kind of like led to this, my own liberation. And I found myself like just anxious when we were doing schoolwork and like all these things. And it was because I was like holding on to this system of like, this is how school's supposed to be. If you don't do it, then you won't be great. And if you don't do it this way, you're not going to be great. And then I'm a failure as a parent and all these things. And it was like, but wait, who told you that? Like, who said this is the only way? Um, and I like to think of these systems, and I can just talk about capitalism, right? As its project, and its relation to neurotypicality.
Yeah.
So yeah, so white supremacy, whiteness, patriarchal, all imperialism, like all of that. Not saying, yeah, is a project, and they're so related to neurotypical, like being neurotypical. Um, because if I could get you to do it this way, then you can do it, and then we just keep, replicating, um, all for the sense of labor, all this for the sense of,
Yeah.
whatever. Um, so yeah, I really bring that approach in, and in the simplest form is really just kind of interrogating, like, where did that come from? Where did that thought come from that this is the way you have to do it? Um, and yeah, that's been a part of my own unmasking. And again, like they're just so, I just feel like neurodivergence or even neurotypical, all of that is so, and the systems are so intertwined with like how we think we're supposed to be. Yeah. So I take that approach in everything. It's either in my writing, it's either in, when I'm with my children, even like, yeah, what if it's appearance, it shows up in my family, it shows up in how, my emails, like how, yeah, it's a lot of, and it's ongoing.
Yeah.
It's ongoing. Like it's ongoing. I do have to be like, wait a minute, is that what I want? And that's where the discernment again with this practice of being embodied, being with self, being with the body, allows for the discernment to be like, oh well, that's actually not me. That's that's the system um, that was put into place to kind of, yeah, yeah,
I love that's such a powerful question of like where does this come from? Or like who is telling me that that has to be this way?
yeah,
And it's I mean just so connected to your other ways in which you're helping people build like that self-trust, but also in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's like the sense of once I sort of uncover that, then there's choice, or then I can be like, do I want that anymore? I get to decide now. And so that's kind of what I was hearing when you were describing that.
yes, that is it. And again, connecting it back to our nervous systems. Our nervous systems,
Yeah.
all it want is to be able to choose.
Mm.
It really does. Like I need to choose, and that that goes back to this kind of like gentleness and this allowance. And if I were to kind of nerd out a bit brain wise.
Please.
College math. If I were to nerd out a bit about that's what's happening in the brain is this when we do that, this neuroplasticity starts to happen, and it's like, oh,
Mm.
I don't have to take that route. I have all of these other ways to do this because I've kind of unlocked or took away some of the traffic jam that was in the body, and so yeah, it creates this neuroplasticity, these new kind of neurons of choosing. You can choose another way. There is another way. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I do want to
Yeah.
check. Okay, we have about 10 minutes, but I also wanted to hear, like, because you had mentioned the neuro-affirming way in which you can now operate, like now having this understanding of yourself. And as someone who has your own practice, like, how do you bring in like a neuro-affirming approach for your own self, like as you do this work?
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I often say to myself is, I can do it my own way. um, but yeah, and so often there are times, it's just this reminder of even understanding my brain. Um, and so that has been number one, and understanding like the way that I gather information is okay. The way that my brain makes connections is important. So just, I think, yeah, I think it took a good amount of understanding that time to me is not, is on this, there is I learned this from someone, Divine Studios. I probably won't get it right, but she talks about, or they talk about, the time for neurodivergence as being on this kind of orbit, right? And so imagine like this oval, and there's this bead on this oval, and so there's these the short curves,
Yeah.
it's where we kind of like speed up, and then there's like the long times where we're like collecting the stardust for all of our things. And so it really is like being okay with, this is how I do it, this acceptance, true acceptance of, this is how I do it, there's nothing wrong with me, there's not one way to do these things. And yeah, I think the focalizing too, just kind of naturally, because of what it is, allows for that to be neuro-affirming. And because it is trauma informed, like, getting all the things out detail wise, as far as like, okay, this is what a session will look like. And this is whatever shows up is what's meant to show up. Like, there's no right or wrong way. Yeah, it's just about kind of being. So I think that has supported my approach, and just this kind of understanding of my brain, understanding that, yeah, I do have to maybe hang a picture up before I get to work. That the side quests are important. They do. They like lead into, so just this
Yeah.
understanding of the way that information for me is taken in, and understanding that it is all connected in a way. Yeah.
It sounds like you've really been able to take off the self-judgment, like to be able to do that. And I really thought that visual was so cool with the elliptical kind of,
Yeah.
because like I think very visually, and so I was like, yeah, that actually describes it really well. Like the fast, and I
Yeah.
was like, fast, and
Yeah. Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Just this understanding that it's all, even, I mentioned this in the practice earlier, retaining information. And it's like, I'm going to retain what's needed. And
Mm.
at some point, my brain will just be like, oh, remember that? And it just like, we'll throw it out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, there it is. But also, I think I want to add this, because this is really important to me too. This ability, and uh, it's a need for me to bring in play, right?
Mm.
And so, yeah, just kind of releasing the expectations that kind of come with work, or, having a business, being an entrepreneur, and really tapping into uh, play, and allowing myself to play. And even in that, what happens when I get to do that for the brain. So yeah, I think play is so, 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 so important um, in helping to kind of take that judgment away, take that expectations away, and just being like, okay, this is who I am. I get to kind of, yeah, have the space and have fun, and then we'll see what happens.
It's so
Yeah.
important. And that, I feel like that connects like so much to the nervous system work that you do, and the brain plasticity, and like all of that is very connected in with that sense of play, being able to access more
Yeah.
flexibility in ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. The
Would you say the
flexibility.
ceramics comes into that, or other
Yeah.
ways that you kind of engage with play?
Um, I'd say the ceramics is definitely a part of that. Ceramics teaches me so much. And a reminder, I just recently made a teapot, and it took me 6 weeks when it shouldn't have, but I was trying to rush it. And there was so much where this teapot was just like, you can't rush this. Um, and so I think ceramics plays a part in that. I think ceramics also kind of allows, there is some, I don't like the word rigidness, when I talk about my autistic part. I don't like rigid, but just very like, the process is the process. Um I think play for me a lot relates to the and how I continue to do that is nature. Um, and my kids, music, and just like movement with music, and like kind of just like naturally like letting that kind of happen. I I dibble and dabble in a lot of things, and so it's really just kind of like, but I will say nature, going out and being in nature and kind of like, yeah, letting nature kind of guide me and being like letting loose of the expectations and just all the elements are probably the biggest things that allow me to play. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know we're coming towards the end of our time, and I'm sure there's like just so much more you could say. So
Yeah.
maybe later on you can come back and tell us more things. But
Yeah.
I was going to ask, like, is what's next for Home and Vessel, and where can people find you, and all that goodness?
Yeah. I took a break in November and December, but I hold these sessions called Embodied Rest. And so I'm going to bring those back up in February. So that's next. And I've started playing with them being virtual so that more people can join them. And then I am in the process of building this kind of online community, a sense for people that may want to kind of do practices on their own or kind of just need, just to dive into some things, whether it is like, all the information and resources. And that should be coming up by February as well, where I kind of have all the things to read, the things to kind of understand more about my work and my practice. So that should be coming soon as well. But yes, just checking out my Instagram or Threads. I'm really loving Threads now, just to kind of just, throw the things out and be okay with throwing them out there. So my Threads at Home and Vessel or my Instagram or my website is a great place.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here,
Yeah.
and for everything you've shared and just your own light. I can definitely feel that, and I so appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.